Whether you are afraid of right-wing tyranny and people like Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and Pierre Poilievre, or you're afraid of left-wing tyranny and people like Justin Trudeau, Mark Carney, Keir Starmer, and Kamala Harris, etc., the defenses that you have as an individual to safeguard your mind against totalitarian rule, i.e. propaganda and manipulation, are the same. So Joost Meerloo was a psychiatrist that lived through the Nazi occupation of Holland, and he detailed out the psychological process that totalitarian regimes use in order to capture the minds of their subjects, and how it's the same defense that individuals have, whether it's coming from a right-wing authoritarian or a left-wing authoritarian, whether it be Stalin or Hitler, whatever. The defenses are the same. So, in general, we may say that there are three influences under which the unbearable becomes bearable. Again, in the first place, one must have faith. This can be simple faith in religious or ethical values, or faith in humanity, or faith in the stability of one's own society, or faith in one's own goals. So you need to have something higher than yourself that you're pursuing, whether that be a religious or ethical moral code. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to go to, this doesn't mean you need to go to church tomorrow, but it could be even things like, say, Stoicism is a ethical code in a sense, a philosophy. Buddhism, both of those don't have deity figures. However, you could also adhere to Christian principles or such. Actually, a good distinction to make here would be the difference between religions and creeds that Carl Jung, a famous psychologist, came up with, which was that creeds are authoritative institutions on our in the actual world in a material sense that seek control over others. A good example of this throughout time would have been, say, the Catholic Church, how that's a creed. Or on a smaller scale, you can think about this as cults, where a leader is trying to control people through religious values. However, Jung made the distinction of religion, which is a individual adhering and having a connection to a higher power outside of this world, something more metaphysical or spiritual. And so these are two very different things. If you're in a creed, you're taking your marching orders from a worldly institution or person. If you're religious, you are adhering to a connection with a higher power or a spiritual being. But again, you can also look at philosophical and ethical codes such as Stoicism or Buddhism. Second, the victim must feel that in spite of the disaster, what has overtaken him and turned him into an outcast, he is wanted and needed somewhere on this earth. So you need a sense of belonging, a sense of community. There was a Russian psychiatrist that, I can't remember his first name, but his last name was Pavlov. And he did a study on the mental conditioning of dogs. And so what he did was he gave a dog food, and while the dog was eating, he would ring a bell. And eventually, after that conditioning took place and they went through this process enough times, he was able to remove the food, and if he rang the bell, the dog would start salivating, because the dog has now made a connection between food and the sound, and that sound is enough to actually elicit a physical response from the dog, even if food is not present. However, a very interesting point of that study is that he found as soon as you bring in the dog's owner into the room, the conditioning wore off. The bell had no effect over the dog anymore as soon as there was a loving relationship present. So mental conditioning requires isolation. Now, wonder why they locked you in your house for 3 years? Anyways, the third is, just to wrap up the second point. Yes, belonging, community, and love. You need strong personal relationships. And lastly, there must be understanding, not sophisticated book knowledge, but simple, even intuitive, psychological understanding of the motivations of the enemy and his deluded drives. Those who cannot understand and are too perplexed break down first. So, you need to understand how propaganda works. You need to understand how these regimes work. A good place to start would be reading the essay Propaganda by Edward Bernays, who is often thought of as the father of public relations. Actually, he was related to Sigmund Freud as well, but he essentially wrote the playbook on how to manipulate people through public relations. And this goes far beyond even politics as well. A good example in, say, business is how they'll use anchoring prices. So let's say you go sign up for a subscription, you'll often see 3 different tiers, right? Entry level, intermediary level, and then a high-end level. And the high-end level, the highest price, is actually just being used as an anchor to make you think that the medium level price is more reasonable than it really is. So when you sign in, you look at the highest price and you go, oh, that's way too much. All of a sudden, even if the medium level would have been too much, it makes it seem more reasonable, makes it seem lower, more affordable. And so they often will use high prices to drive you towards the middle package, which they actually want you to sign up for. But this happens all throughout policy and government, etc. as well, and different actions. However, you can understand how propaganda works in order to make sure that it doesn't take control over you. So just to boil down this video, 3 things you need in order to safeguard yourself against mass delusion. First, you need faith, something higher than yourself that you are striving to achieve, whether that be adherence to a ethical code or a religion, or even, say, business goals. Like, you need to have goals. You need to have something worth striving towards, something to better yourself. Second, you need belonging. You need a community. You need loving relationships. And third, you need understanding of the enemy. I hope you have found this video helpful, and I hope more people start employing these, because mass delusion is definitely taking hold.